Are you ready for the madness? I am serious. Are you ready for the madness? I'm not talking about the Final Four this weekend. I'm not talking about women's college basketball, also known as the real March Madness in mainstream media circles. I'm not talking about the last 2 weeks of the NBA regular season, which is packed with massive games that will impact the playoffs. Definitely not talking about the start of Major League Baseball. The only thing maddening about that is baseball beginning another painfully boring season. What I'm talking about here is the real madness. Taking place this month in Washington, D.C., on the campus of George Washington University. This heated battle, it's coming down to the wire. Wagers have already been placed. Sports books have adjusted their odds to balance market demand. Students on campus, they are rife with anticipation. They cannot wait to determine the winner. Now, you might be wondering, what is the competition? They're calling it Moniker Madness. This right here is the battle of all battles. Students at George Washington University, they can pride themselves in taking on this serious challenge and coming out victorious. Because in April, students and athletes at George Washington University, they will finally have a new team name. Now, I know this might not seem like a big deal. I know for the normal person, this might seem even a bit trivial. But trust me when I tell you, this is monumental. This is important. You see, since 1926, George Washington, they have gone by the Colonials. Ooh, Colonials! That is no bueno. If you check the woke dictionary of banned words, Colonials makes the top 10. Casey, what is so offensive about the word Colonials? Really? Do I really need to explain it to you? Actually, let me allow students from George Washington to explain it themselves. Back in 2019, they drafted a petition pressuring the administration to change names. When you think about it, this is kind of weird. It's strange. When I was in college, we weren't worried about some damn petition. We weren't worried about the school nickname. The only thing we were worried about was, where is the party at? Perhaps this generation is a bit more socially conscious. I know one thing they definitely are, they're more sensitive. They are offended by any and everything. Included in this petition was the reasoning students at George Washington wanted to change names. Colonials were active purveyors of colonialism. Yeah. No shit. That's like saying rectum respecters are active purveyors of the butt bongo. They were complicit in militarized and racialized violence and oppression. Oh, oppression! I feel so oppressed. I am paying 60 grand a year to attend this dump, and they don't even offer supersized cucumbers in the cafeteria. The word salad continues. Colonialism was built upon usurping land from racialized communities through dehumanizing violence and suppression. First of all, who fucking talks like this? What 18 to 21-year-old kid talks like this? This petition sounds like it was written by some tenured professor teaching graduate-level courses on mythical racism at Woke U. The Wanker Spankers, they have been going after team names in sports for the last 3 or 4 years. This afternoon, I'm reading an article in the New York Times. They were commending the Washington Redskins for changing their name to the Cucumber Commanders. Their former name was highly offensive to indigenous people. Now, the New York Times, they refused to mention the old name, Redskins, because they were afraid of triggering what they are now calling indigenous people. Whatever happened to Native American? Casey, you can't say that. It's offensive. Okay, whatever happened to Indian? No! That word has been outlawed. Please refer to them as the Guardians. The New York Times, they were attempting to explain this fake outrage going on at the campus of George Washington University. Students were visibly upset. They were triggered because they were called the Colonials. Let me get this straight. First of all, you knew they were Colonials before you submitted your application to attend the school. Second, and I want to make sure I am understanding this correctly, we can't use the name Colonials because that's offensive to indigenous people. We can't use the name Indians because that's offensive. Can't use chiefs, can't use braves, we can't use Seminoles, we can't use bandits, that's offensive to criminals. We can't use yellow jackets, that's offensive to bugs. So, what can we use? Perhaps we can look to the past and use the nickname the university used before they became infected with mythical racism and called themselves the Colonials. Prior to 1926, they were called the Axemen. Obviously, that is no bueno. Axes, they're used to cut down trees. Trees are a deity in the woke community. They're not only worshipped, they're also used for purposes of pleasure. With all these potential nicknames off limits, what name can we use? Luckily for us, the students at George Washington University have us covered. They formed a coalition called the ABCC. They stopped at C because that's the furthest they could make it through the alphabet. Outside of ABC, the only other letters they are familiar with are LGBT. Some of the brighter students, they are also familiar with the plus plus. ABCC, it stands for Anything But Colonials Coalition. Oh, how original! This coalition of future shitfucks put their collective brain cell together. They came up with a list of 10 names. Over the last few months, they have narrowed down the list to the final 4. Are you ready? The first finalist, the Ambassadors, the George Washington Ambassadors. I can see why they have an affinity to this name. The word ambassadors, it includes reference to their favorite body part, the ass. Option 2, the Revolutionaries. I thought we were trying to get away from nicknames that triggered violence. There have been a lot of revolutions throughout human history. Almost all of them have been violent. Option 3, the Sentinels. That is god awful, but nothing could be worse than option 4, the Blue Fog. The Blue Fog. I guess it kind of makes sense. I would imagine most students on campus are living in a fog. Unsurprisingly, alumni from George Washington University, they are not pleased with this name change. Now, just to be clear, the name is changing. Administrators, they assumed the position of fellatio last year and folded to the pressure of their students. But alumni, they want to keep the Colonials because they feel it represents the spirit of the Revolutionary War. It represents fighting against tyranny. They're absolutely right, but the problem is, tyranny is exactly what these students are fighting for, not against. The New York Times spoke with Denver Brunsman, an associate professor of history at George Washington University. Now, being a history professor, you would think Denver Brunsman would understand the feelings of the alumni. If so, you would think wrong. Mr. Brunsman claimed George Washington would not have identified as a colonial. He's probably right. I doubt George Washington would have identified as anything because back then identifiers did not exist. The New York Times claimed students at George Washington University could not be proud because they were named Colonials. The Times, they asked one of them what was so displeasing about the name. Colonials represent exclusivity and hierarchy and racism in its most violent form. Okay. It got me wondering, though, what are the demographics at George Washington University? Who is actually offended by the name Colonials? According to students in the mainstream media, Native Americans are offended by the word, or, as they like to call them, the Guardians. So I was wondering, how many Guardians at George Washington University were offended by the term Colonials? It's not like this is a major program. This isn't a professional team with a large national profile. I would imagine 99.9% of this audience didn't watch one George Washington game all season. I looked up the demographics of the school. There are 27,000 young people wasting their time and parents' money by attending George Washington University. 46% of these students choose to identify as evil white birthing persons. 10% choose to identify as black. Another 10% are Hispanic, 12% are Asian, 13% are international students. That doesn't sound very diverse to me. Looks like George Washington has a serious diversity problem. They have too many evil white people paying 60 grand a year for a worthless diploma. Imagine my surprise, though, when I found out less than 1% of the student body identifies as indigenous. Less than 1%. So, who is really offended here? There's barely 100 Native Americans on campus, so who is really offended? As of right now, George Washington, he is still the official mascot and still the name of the school. If I had to guess, they'll be coming for him next. Imagine sending your kid to college. Between tuition, living expenses, you're paying $100,000 a year? $400,000 over 4 years. And instead of learning anything useful, they're learning how to be offended. They are learning how to be the victim. What are these kids going to do when they enter the real world? What if they get a job at BlackRock? Excuse me, Mr. BlackRock, can we change the company name? The term BlackRock is highly offensive to people who identify as rocks. Give me your thoughts. The final four for George Washington is the ambassadors, the sentinels, the blue fog, and the revolutionaries. I guess they missed the shit fucks. That should be the team name. To be honest with you, I think they should stick with Colonials. But seriously, do you think it's worth it to send your kid to college anymore? 20 years ago, college was almost a requirement, but today I think college is a complete waste of time and money. It's nothing but a training center for future shitfucks of America. Is college no longer worth it? You let me know. Sound off in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click the notification bell to receive all notifications from the channel. Best way to contact me is by email at btlkc84@gmail.com, kc_btl84 on Twitter. I'll see you guys tomorrow.